through his testimony, we did find a few contradictions, which didn't necessarily equal guilt, but it did make us, take great caution with some of his other testimony.
It took jurors 10 days of deliberation to find Rod Blagojevich guilty of 17 counts against him. Those counts included accusations that the former governor tried to sell a Senate seat. Jurors said they found Blagojevich likable on the stand, but that wasn't enough to find him not guilty.
Joining us now is jury consultant Bill Grimes. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Is it unusual to hear, you always wonder if emotion takes over the facts for human beings in the jury. Were you surprised to hear them say that they really like this guy, and yet they still found him guilty?
Well, that's not uncommon. You like people, but you don't necessarily want them running your company or your government. People may like Robin Williams, but they don't want him to be president.
Although he might be a good president, who knows? What struck you when you saw the interview with all the jury came out, and they all came out together? You saw 11 women and 1 man, and you see one woman who looked like the foreman who was really doing all the speaking. What struck you about how they were seated or what they had to say?
Well, that they all seem to get along fairly well, and that's important in a deliberative process. You have to get people who get along. The first jury, it appears that there were people who didn't get along that well, and this one did, and they were able to convince each other and come to a consensus. And they seemed relieved, too, that they finished the job and they felt that they accomplished something.
So I guess all that speculation that taking as long as it did, 10 days, was helpful for Blagojevich because you're hoping to get at least one juror to be not decided, right? But it turns out everyone was wrong.
Right. Well, in the jury, they also were, the prosecution did an excellent job in, they had a test the first time, which didn't work and it was embarrassing for them. But they dropped the racketeering charges, which people don't really understand what racketeering is anyway, other than it's something that gangsters do. That added about 25 questions to the verdict form. It doubled the verdict form, and it just made it really complex. And I think the defense was able to at least imply to the first jury that this was piling on. This was really not fair to the former governor. But this jury didn't have to deal with that stuff, and it was a much more simplified case.
Rod Blagojevich, the ex-governor's brother, said he felt juries go in, and especially this one, thinking the government is right. Do you find that to be the case with juries?
Some jurors do think because the case has gotten this far, there might be something to it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gotten this far. You asked me about what struck me when I saw the jurors. It was almost as though they thought, well, of course he's guilty. Why would you think anything else? We heard the evidence. He said it right out, and he said it himself. They didn't, and that's what some of the jurors in the first case thought. It's a slam dunk. Of course he's guilty. Of course you connect the dots. You know exactly what he's doing. Not everyone felt that way, but some thought there's no contest here. He was guilty.
Do you think moving forward that jurors in cases like this will demand tapes? Would it be difficult to convict in a case like this without tapes?
Well, the tapes certainly were important. As one of the jurors said, it was easier to decide the case where there were tapes, where there was his voice saying what happened. On charges where there weren't tapes, where there weren't recorded phone conversations, it was more difficult because you're having to rely on testimony of what people thought and what people remembered, and that's not always credible.
Bill Grimes, jury consultant, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
It is 7:19.